You never think the man who promised to love you forever, and the sister you've shared your whole life with, could be the ones to break your heart in the same room, on the same day, over the same tiny, innocent baby. I stood there, watching my husband lean in and kiss my sister, right in front of her newborn son. My mind screamed that it was nothing, a mistake, a moment of exhaustion, of emotion, of anything but what it looked like. But then I heard him speak, and in that one sentence, every memory, every late night, every unanswered question I'd buried for months came rushing back at once. What he said next didn't just shatter my marriage. It shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our family's life. My sister had just brought her newborn son home from the hospital, and we were all gathered in her living room, the air thick with the smell of fresh flowers and the soft cries of a baby who didn't yet know how complicated the world could be. I remember standing by the window, watching the afternoon light fall across the crib, thinking about how lucky we all were. My husband stood a few feet away holding a cup of coffee, smiling the way he always did when he was around family. I had no reason to doubt him. Not then. Not ever, really. My sister walked over to him, cradling her son, wanting to share the moment, the way new mothers do, desperate for everyone to feel the same overwhelming love they feel. She leaned in to hug him, to thank him maybe, for something small, something forgettable. But it wasn't a hug, it was a kiss. Not the quick, polite kind you give family at a celebration. This one lingered, just a second too long. Just close enough that something in my chest went cold before my mind even understood why. I told myself I was imagining it. That grief and hormones and exhaustion made everyone act strange sometimes. That my husband was simply overwhelmed with joy for his sister-in-law. That affection between family could look different than I expected. But my body knew before my mind did. My hands went numb around the cup I was holding. My breath caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. I glanced around the room. Did anyone else see it? Did anyone else feel the air shift the way I did? No one reacted. No one even looked up. The baby cooed. Someone laughed at something on the television. Life continued as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. I felt it in the pit of my stomach. That instinctive, primal warning that tells you the ground beneath you is no longer solid. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask, what was that? But the words caught in my throat, trapped behind decades of trust, love, and the terrifying fear of being wrong. What if I embarrassed everyone? What if I destroyed a beautiful family moment over nothing? So I stayed silent. I smiled. I even complimented the baby's tiny fingers, the same fingers everyone was admiring just moments before betrayal introduced itself so quietly, so casually, into the happiest room in the house. But deep inside, I knew that kiss wasn't nothing. And I knew somehow that my life, my marriage, my family, everything I thought I understood, was about to change forever. To understand how deeply that moment cut into me, you have to understand who I was before it happened. I wasn't a suspicious wife. I wasn't the kind of woman who checked phones at midnight or questioned every late night at work. I trusted my husband the way you trust gravity. Quietly. Completely, without ever thinking to question it. We had been married for years. Through hard times, through arguments about money, through the slow, unglamorous work of building a life together, he had always been the steady one, the one who showed up, the one who remembered anniversaries and held my hand in waiting rooms and told me, over and over, that I was the only one for him. And my sister, she wasn't just family, she was my best friend before she was my sister-in-law's confidante, before she was anyone's wife or mother. We grew up sharing a bedroom, whispering secrets under blankets, promising each other that no man, no fight, no distance would ever come between us. When she got pregnant, I was the first person she called. When she was scared about becoming a mother, I was the one who sat with her at 2 a.m., reassuring her that she was going to be wonderful at this. So when I say I never saw it coming, I mean that in the truest sense of the words. There were no red flags, no suspicious texts, no unexplained absences. If you had asked me, the day before that kiss, to name the two people I trusted most in this world, I would have said my husband and my sister. Without hesitation, without a second thought. That's what made the betrayal so much harder to process. It wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the total collapse of every assumption I had built my adult life on. If I could be wrong about them. The two people I trusted with everything. What else in my life was an illusion? I share my perspective not to ask for pity, but because I think so many people believe betrayal only happens to those who should have seen it coming. The truth is, sometimes the people closest to you, the ones you'd bet your entire life on, are capable of things you never imagined. I was a wife, a sister, a woman who believed with her whole heart that family was the one thing that could never break. I was about to learn how wrong I was. There's a version of shock that people don't talk about enough, the kind that doesn't make you cry out or drop what you're holding or run from the room. The kind that just freezes you, stops time, turns your whole body into something separate from your mind, like you're watching your own life happen from somewhere outside yourself. That's what happened to me in the seconds after that kiss. I didn't gasp. I didn't confront them. I didn't even blink, if I remember correctly. I just stood there, my fingers wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold without me noticing, staring at a scene that my brain refused to fully process. Part of me, the rational part, the part that had spent years building a life on trust, immediately went to work rewriting what I had just seen. It was quick. It was nothing. Maybe I misjudged the angle. Maybe grief over their mother's passing last year made them emotional. Maybe new babies make people affectionate in ways that look strange but mean nothing. I wanted so badly to believe my own explanations. I needed to believe them, because the alternative was too enormous to hold in my mind all at once. If that kiss meant what some small, quiet part of me suspected it meant, then everything I thought I knew. My marriage, my sisterhood, my family, my identity as a wife and a sister, was built on a lie. So I did what so many people do in moments of unbearable truth. I compartmentalized. I smiled at the baby. I said something about how beautiful he was, how much he looked like his mother. I laughed at a joke someone made, though I couldn't tell you now what it was about. I moved through the rest of that afternoon like an actress, reciting lines from a play she hadn't rehearsed, terrified that if she stopped performing normalcy for even a second, the whole illusion would shatter. But underneath that performance, my mind was racing, replaying the kiss over and over, analyzing the way my husband's hand had rested a little too long on my sister's back, the way she hadn't pulled away as quickly as she should have, the way neither of them had looked at me afterward, not even once, as if some silent agreement passed between them not to. I've since learned that this frozen state has a name. It's often called the fawn response, one of the lesser-known reactions to trauma, alongside fight, flight, and freeze. Your body decides that pretending everything is fine is safer than confronting the danger directly. It protects you in the moment, even as it costs you clarity, even as it costs you time you'll never get back. I didn't know any of that then. All I knew was that something had shifted permanently in that room, and that I was too afraid, too devastated, too unprepared to face it head on. Not yet, but that moment of frozen silence didn't last. Because later that evening, in a quiet hallway, I would overhear something that shattered whatever fragile denial I had left. The house had quieted down by early evening. Most of the relatives had left, dishes had been cleared, and the newborn was finally asleep in his crib upstairs. I told myself I needed a moment alone, so I slipped down the hallway toward the guest bathroom, my mind still tangled in the knots that Kiss had tied hours earlier. That's when I heard their voices. Low, careful. Coming from the small sitting room just off the hallway, the one with the door that never quite closed all the way, I recognized my husband's voice first, quieter than I'd ever heard him speak, almost pleading. Then my sister's voice, tight with something that sounded like fear, or guilt, or both. I don't know what made me stop instead of announcing myself the way I normally would have. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe some part of me already knew that what I was about to hear would explain everything I couldn't make sense of just hours before. So I stood there, in the shadow of that hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was terrified they'd somehow hear it too. "We can't keep doing this," my sister whispered, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard from her before. Not even during her hardest days of pregnancy, not even during labor, not now, not with the baby here. My husband's response came slower, heavier, like each word cost him something. I know we agreed. But seeing him, seeing his face, I couldn't just pretend anymore. Pretend. That word alone sent a chill straight through me. Pretend what? For how long? Since when had my husband and my sister been living a version of reality that required pretending? That required whispered conversations in closed rooms while I sat in the next room, blissfully unaware. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, terrified my legs might give out before I heard the rest. "We have to tell her eventually," my sister said, her voice barely audible now. "She deserves to know the truth. About all of it. The truth. Not what happened today. Not the kiss. All of it. As if the kiss itself was only the surface of something far bigger, something that had been building long before that afternoon, long before that baby had even been born. I don't remember deciding to keep listening. I don't remember consciously choosing to stay hidden in that hallway, instead of walking in and demanding answers right then and there. All I remember is the overwhelming, suffocating need to understand, fully, completely, before I let them know I had heard anything at all. Because whatever the truth was, I sensed it was about to change every single thing I believed about my marriage, my family, and the tiny, innocent baby sleeping peacefully upstairs, utterly unaware of the storm quietly gathering around his crib. I stood frozen in that hallway, my back pressed against the cool wall, waiting for whatever came next. Part of me wanted to walk away, to pretend I'd heard nothing, to preserve just a little longer the life I thought I had. But another part of me, the part that already sensed everything was about to change, needed to know. My husband's voice broke the silence again, quieter than before, almost trembling. I should have told her the moment we found out. Before the wedding. Before any of this. Before the wedding. Those 3 words landed like a physical blow. Whatever this was, it wasn't new. It wasn't something that had started that afternoon, or even during the pregnancy. This was something old. Something that had existed underneath our entire marriage, hidden beneath years of dinners, holidays, anniversaries, and quiet nights I thought were built on total honesty. My sister's voice came next, shakier now, edged with something that sounded like desperation. "It wouldn't have changed anything back then. You know that. We made a choice, and now there's a baby involved. An innocent baby who has nothing to do with any of this. An innocent baby who has nothing to do with any of this." My mind raced through every possibility, each one worse than the last. Was my husband the baby's biological father? Had there been a relationship between them long before my sister ever met the man she called her husband? Was this a secret they'd buried together for years, one that had just resurfaced the moment that tiny newborn was placed into the world? Then came the sentence that changed everything. "She's going to ask why he has your eyes," my husband said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep looking at that baby and pretending I don't know the truth. The hallway seemed to tilt beneath me. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat, refusing to move in either direction. "Your eyes, not eyes like the family, not eyes like his dad. Your eyes," spoken as though there was no question left to ask, no possibility left to consider. I don't know how long I stood there after that. Time seemed to fracture into pieces too small to measure. All I knew was that the 2 people I trusted most in this world, my husband and my sister, had been carrying a secret that reached back years, one that had somehow led to the tiny, sleeping baby upstairs, a child who might share more with my husband than either of them had ever planned to admit. Every memory I had of my marriage, every quiet moment I once treasured, suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger's life. Not mine. Not anymore. Even now, when I replay that conversation in my mind, it's my sister's voice that haunts me the most. Not my husband's confession. Not the weight of his words, but the fear laced through every syllable she spoke. Fear that told me she had been carrying this secret far longer than I ever imagined, and far more painfully than I ever considered. "Please," she said, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. Not during our childhood fights. Not during her divorce scare years earlier. Not even during the hardest hours of her labor. This was different. This was raw, unfiltered desperation. "Please don't do this now. Not today. Not with him just hours old." There was something in the way she said him. Soft, protective, almost pleading. That told me this wasn't just about protecting a secret. She was trying to protect her son. From judgment. From confusion. From a truth that could reshape his entire identity before he'd even opened his eyes to the world outside her arms. "I can't keep lying to her," my husband answered, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Every time I look at him, I see it. I can't pretend it isn't real." My sister let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob, but wasn't far from it either. "You think I don't see it too? You think I haven't spent the last 9 months terrified of this exact moment? I know what I did. I know what we did. But punishing me now, in front of everyone, isn't going to undo any of it. punishing her? Did he want to confess out of guilt? Out of some warped sense of duty to me? Or was this simply the final unraveling of a secret too heavy for either of them to carry any longer? Her next words came slower, heavier, filled with something that sounded uncomfortably close to guilt-soaked love. I never wanted to hurt her. You know that. Out of everyone in this world, she's the one person I never wanted to lose. For a moment, silence swallowed the hallway. I stood frozen, my hand pressed hard against my chest, as if I could physically hold my heart together. Whatever was happening in that room wasn't just betrayal. It was grief. Grief over a secret that had cost my sister sleep, peace, and possibly her relationship with the one person she claimed to love unconditionally, me. But grief or not, guilt or not, none of it erased what had been done. None of it erased the years of silence, the calculated omissions, the moments they had chosen concealment over honesty, again and again, right beneath my unsuspecting nose. Whatever my sister's intentions were, one truth remained unshaken. She had chosen to protect her secret longer than she had chosen to protect me. And that realization hurt almost as much as the secret itself. I don't know how long I stood in that hallway after hearing everything. Long enough for my legs to grow numb. Long enough for the shock to settle into something colder, heavier. Something closer to grief than anger. Though I knew anger was coming too. Waiting just beneath the surface like a storm gathering strength before it breaks. My mind split into pieces, each one screaming a different direction. One part of me wanted to storm into that room right then and demand answers. To look my husband in the eyes and ask how long, how many years, how many lies. To turn to my sister and ask how she could hold my hand through her pregnancy. Cry on my shoulder about becoming a mother, and never once tell me the truth about the man who might have fathered her child. Another part of me wanted to run. To grab my coat, walk out the front door, and disappear into the night air. Away from that house, away from that family, away from a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to hold. But the loudest part of me, the part that had spent years building a life around loyalty and family, kept whispering one word over and over: think. Because upstairs, sleeping peacefully in a crib he had no say in choosing, was a newborn baby. An innocent child who had no understanding of the storm gathering just beyond his nursery door. If I stormed in and shattered that fragile peace in one explosive confrontation, what would that mean for him? For his first days in this world, forever marked by chaos instead of the love and calm every child deserves. I thought about my sister too. Despite everything, despite the anger simmering beneath my ribs, some old, deep-rooted part of me still loved her fiercely, still wanted to protect her the way I had since we were children sharing secrets under blankets. Could I really destroy her in front of her son's crib, on the very day she brought him home? And then there was my husband. The man I had built a decade of memories with, who I had trusted completely, who was now, in the span of one overheard conversation, becoming someone I no longer recognized. Did I owe him the dignity of a private confrontation? Or had he forfeited every ounce of dignity the moment he chose secrecy over honesty, year after year? I realized, standing in that hallway, that whatever I decided next wouldn't just affect me. It would affect an entire family. A newborn baby, a fragile sister, a marriage built on a foundation I no longer trusted. So instead of storming into that room in a blaze of fury, I made a different choice. I decided to wait, to gather myself. To choose the moment of confrontation on my own terms, rather than letting shock and rage make that decision for me. Because if I was going to demand the truth, I wanted every single piece of it. Not just the fragments I'd overheard through a cracked door. I waited 3 days before I said a single word. 3 days of smiling through phone calls, of responding to my sister's texts about the baby's feeding schedule, of lying beside my husband at night, pretending to sleep while every nerve in my body stayed wide awake, replaying that hallway conversation over and over until I knew it by heart. I needed those 3 days, not to forgive, not to forget, but to make sure that when I finally spoke, I would do it with clarity instead of chaos. I chose a Sunday afternoon. I asked my sister to come over, to talk, and I asked my husband to be home too. No baby this time, no audience. Just the three of us, sitting in the same living room where our family had once felt unbreakable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I looked at both of them and said the words I had rehearsed 100 times in my mind. I heard you. In the hallway. That day at the hospital. The silence that followed was unlike any silence I had ever experienced. Thick, suffocating, filled with the sound of two people realizing that the secret they had spent years protecting was no longer theirs alone to carry. My sister's face went pale. My husband's jaw tightened, and for the first time in our entire marriage, he couldn't meet my eyes. I know about the eyes, I continued, my voice steady even as my hands trembled in my lap. I know you said before the wedding. I know there's something between you two that started long before that baby was ever born. And I deserve, we all deserve, the entire truth. Not fragments. Not whispers behind closed doors. All of it. My sister broke first, tears spilling before she could even form words. It was one summer, she whispered. Years ago. Before either of you were even together. It ended before you two got engaged. I swear it did. My husband finally spoke, his voice raw. I didn't know she was pregnant back then. I found out the truth about the timeline only recently, when I saw the baby's eyes and started doing the math. I should have told you the moment I suspected. I was a coward. I was terrified of destroying everything. Our marriage, her relationship with you, this whole family. The confrontation didn't erupt into the screaming match I once imagined. Instead, it unfolded slowly, painfully, each confession peeling back another layer of a truth that had been buried for years. I asked questions. They answered, sometimes through tears, sometimes through long, guilty silences. By the end of that conversation, I didn't have all the answers I wanted. Paternity was still uncertain. Timelines were still tangled. But one thing had become devastatingly clear. The family I thought I knew had been built on omissions I never agreed to be part of. And now, sitting in that quiet living room, I had to decide what came next, not for them, but for myself. In the weeks that followed, our family didn't explode the way movies make you believe these moments always do. There were no dramatic screaming matches in parking lots, no slammed doors, no dishes thrown against walls. Instead, everything unraveled slowly, quietly, in the kind of aching silence that somehow hurts more than chaos ever could. I asked for a paternity test. Not out of cruelty, not out of a need for revenge, but because I refused to build the next chapter of my life on assumptions, gossip, or overheard hallway confessions. My sister agreed immediately, her voice hollow with a mixture of relief and dread. My husband didn't hesitate either. If anything, he seemed almost grateful that the truth, whatever it turned out to be, would finally have somewhere solid to stand. The results came back 2 weeks later. He wasn't the father. The baby's eyes, it turned out, weren't proof of anything at all. Just a rare genetic trait that had skipped 2 generations before resurfacing in her son. A trait that, coincidentally, mirrored my husband's own eye color almost exactly. The before the wedding comment I had clung to as evidence of some long, hidden affair. It referred to a brief, painful summer years earlier when my sister and my husband had dated. Long before he and I had ever met. A relationship neither of them had ever told me about, buried out of awkwardness rather than malice. It didn't excuse the years of secrecy. It didn't erase the fact that both of them had chosen silence over honesty for reasons that still felt, to me, insufficient. Trust isn't only broken by literal betrayal. It's broken by everything left unsaid, every omission disguised as protection. So even with the truth laid bare, even with paternity proven, even with a plausible, almost mundane explanation replacing my darkest fears, I still had a decision to make. Could I rebuild trust with a husband who had let me believe, even briefly, in something so devastating rather than simply telling me the truth years earlier? Could I repair my relationship with a sister who had prioritized her own comfort over my right to know the full story of the people I loved most? I won't pretend I have all the answers today. Some wounds don't heal in weeks or months. They heal slowly, unevenly, sometimes leaving scars that never fully disappear. What I do know is this: the version of my family that existed before that kiss is gone forever. What comes next, forgiveness, distance, healing, or something in between, is still being written. And maybe that's the most honest ending I can offer you. Not a neatly wrapped resolution, but the raw, uncertain truth of what it means to rebuild trust after discovering how much you never knew about the people closest to you.